Welcome to Biden Brief. The content of the briefing includes peering into the crystal ball, 10 national security predictions for 2024. U.S. tries to persuade shippers to sail Red Sea despite Houthi attacks. Maine kicks Trump off ballot under 14th Amendment. Biden administration grants Louisiana power to approve carbon capture wells. Body of U.S.-Israeli woman, killed on October 7, remains in Gaza, kibbutz. Peering into the crystal ball, 10 national security predictions for 2024. Foreign policy. Foreign Policy's SITREP has made predictions about some of the biggest national security challenges of 2024. The first prediction is that Joe Biden will narrowly win the U.S. presidential election for a second term. Secondly, they predict that North Korea will conduct its 7th nuclear test. Thirdly, they predict that there will be more coups in Africa's coup belt, with Chad being the next country to fall. Fourthly, they predict that Sudan's military leader, Abdel Fattah al-Burhan, will be ousted. Fifthly, they predict that there will be a stalemate in Ukraine's conflict with Russia. Sixthly, they predict that more funds will be unlocked for Ukraine from the $300 billion in assets from Russian oligarchs that regulators have frozen. Seventhly, they predict that the Israel-Hamas war will not expand to a full second front involving Hezbollah. Eighthly, they predict that there will be more dangerous maneuvers in the South China Sea by Chinese vessels. Ninthly, they predict that Sweden will finally join NATO. Lastly, they predict that the global health community will go on the offensive against malaria, making progress towards eliminating the disease by 2030. U.S. tries to persuade shippers to sail Red Sea despite Houthi attacks. Yahoo! Half the container fleet that regularly sails the Red Sea and Suez Canal is avoiding the route due to concerns about Houthi missile attacks, according to industry data. Most shipping companies are unwilling to risk sailings in the area, fearing a drone or missile will get through defenses. The situation is pushing up shipping costs as vessels take the longer, and more expensive, route around the southern tip of Africa. The Pentagon is working to reassure shipping firms that a multinational coalition is operating in the area, but shipping companies are not yet convinced. Maine kicks Trump off ballot under 14th Amendment. Yahoo! Maine has become the second state to declare Donald Trump ineligible to run for president again following his alleged involvement in the insurrection on January 6, 2021. The Maine Secretary of State, Shenna Bellows, declared under the 14th Amendment that Trump cannot serve as he allegedly supported or engaged in an insurrection. Colorado also made a similar ruling last week, which is likely to end up in front of the U.S. Supreme Court in the near future. Biden administration grants Louisiana power to approve carbon capture wells. Associated Press. The Biden administration is granting Louisiana regulators the authority to attract and approve carbon capture projects, allowing the state to issue permits for wells that store carbon dioxide. This move will speed up approvals of new projects critical for reducing greenhouse gas emissions, but environmental groups have expressed concerns about the state's ability to properly oversee the industry. The Environmental Protection Agency said that the Louisiana agreement includes safeguards to protect communities near these facilities, and that these standards will serve as a model for other states. Body of U.S.-Israeli woman, killed on October 7, remains in Gaza, kibbutz. South China Morning Post. Judith Weinstein Haggai, a U.S.-Israeli woman who was seized by Hamas in an attack on October 7, was killed on the same day, and her body remains in Gaza, according to her kibbutz community. The announcement follows confirmation on December 23 that her husband, Gad Haggai, was also killed in the attack. Israel says 129 captives are still missing in Gaza, including 23 believed to have been killed. 3 hostages were mistakenly shot dead by soldiers in Gaza, according to the Israeli army. U.S. President Joe Biden has vowed to work to bring hostages held in Gaza home. Friday briefing, a pattern of rape and torture on October 7. New York Times. Israeli officials say that everywhere Hamas terrorists struck on October 7, a rave, military bases along the Gaza border and kibbutz after kibbutz, they brutalized women. A 2-month investigation by the Times established that the attacks against women were not isolated events, but part of a broader pattern of gender-based violence. Wars, Trump's courtroom dramas and Our New King, The World in 2023. The Sydney Morning Herald. The year 2023 was filled with major stories and events from around the world. In North Asia, China struggled to re-engage with the world after lifting COVID restrictions, with its economy suffering and foreign investors hesitant to return. The Chinese government also faced challenges in repairing fractured ties with the United States and Australia. In Southeast Asia, there were political dynasties emerging in Indonesia and the Philippines, while Thailand experienced political drama, and Malaysia saw stability under Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim. Timor-Leste sought to secure a deal with Australia, and armed ethnic groups in Myanmar captured military outposts. In Europe, Russia's notorious mercenary leader, Yevgeny Prigozhin, staged a failed insurrection. The war in Ukraine continued to cast a shadow across Europe, leading to economic and political unrest. Far-right and populist forces gained traction in countries like Slovakia, Germany, and the Netherlands. In the Middle East, violence and conflict persisted in Israeli-occupied territories and the Gaza Strip, while Saudi Arabia continued its efforts to diversify its economy through sports and entertainment. The United Arab Emirates hosted the UN Climate Change Conference in Dubai. In North America, former U.S. President Donald Trump dominated the headlines despite facing numerous criminal charges. President Joe Biden faced political and domestic challenges, including partisan battles over aid to Ukraine and support for Israel. In South America, Brazil saw the inauguration of President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, and a Trumpian election in Argentina. The Venezuelan crisis continued, and violence marred elections in Ecuador and Peru. Africa experienced severe flooding and drought, coups in Niger and Gabon, and ongoing conflicts in Sudan and Ethiopia. In Oceania, New Zealand saw the resignation of its prime minister, a change in government and a rise in crime. China's influence in the Pacific region also became a significant issue. Not only Trump, who are the other Republicans running for U.S. president? The Sydney Morning Herald. Several Republican candidates are running for the U.S. presidency in 2024. Nikki Haley, the former U.S. ambassador to the United Nations, is seen as a moderate alternative to Donald Trump. Ron DeSantis, the governor of Florida, has positioned himself to the right of Trump but remains behind in the polls. Vivek Ramaswamy, a former biotechnology investor, has failed to gain traction with his campaign. Chris Christie, the former governor of New Jersey, has been critical of Trump and is one of the few Republicans willing to directly confront him. Asa Hutchinson, the former governor of Arkansas, has called for Trump to step aside and has emphasized his conservative policies. New Hampshire casino to shut down for 6 months, could reopen if sold by owner accused of fraud. Associated Press. Andy Sanborn's New Hampshire casino, which he is being accused of purchasing luxury cars with fraudulently obtained COVID-19 relief loans, will be closed on the 1st of January next year. It will be allowed to reopen in 6 months if it is sold to a new owner, according to the State Lottery Commission. Sanborn, a former state senator, owns the Concord Casino within the Draft Sports Bar and Grill in Concord, and was seeking to open a larger charitable gaming venue nearby. The commission is arguing for his license to be revoked because he has improperly obtained federal funds and failed to keep accurate records. An investigation has found that Sanborn fraudulently obtained $844,000 in funding from the Small Business Administration between December 2021 and February 2022. Israel admits fault with pair of fatal Gaza strikes. The Hill opinion. The Israeli military has acknowledged that 2 strikes on the Maghazi refugee camp on Christmas Eve killed civilians. The strikes were part of Israel's offensive in Gaza, which has led to over 20,000 Palestinian deaths. The Israeli military said the strikes hit buildings adjacent to their intended targets, causing unintended harm to additional uninvolved civilians. The Gaza Health Ministry reported that at least 70 people were killed in the strikes. International pressure for a ceasefire continues to rise, with Pope Francis calling for an end to the military operations and a solution to the humanitarian crisis. The U.S. government has urged Israel to draw back its military operations, but Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has stated that the war will continue for a long time. Some Muslim American advocates hesitant to work with White House on Islamophobia. Yahoo! The White House's push to create a strategy to counter Islamophobia is facing reluctance amid a spike in hate-fueled incidents against Arab and Muslim Americans since Hamas' October 7 attack on Israel. CBS News spoke with several Muslim and Arab American advocates who voiced frustration with the Biden administration's response to the situation in Gaza, citing the increasing number of civilians that have been killed and President Biden stopping short of calling for a ceasefire. 2023's problems and peeves are bid a symbolic farewell at pre-New Year's Times Square event. Associated Press. Good Riddance Day is an annual event held in Times Square where people gather to symbolically let go of their burdens and bad memories from the previous year. Participants write down their problems and then watch as a magician burns them away. This year, people expressed a desire to shed issues such as anger, medical bills, work stress, insecurities, regrets, bad habits, and worries about COVID-19. The event aims to provide a fresh start and a chance to focus on positivity and improvement in the upcoming year. Despite the difficulties of the past year, many participants expressed optimism and a desire for a better future. Joe Biden extends EU steel, aluminium tariff exemption for 2 years. South China Morning Post. U.S. President Joe Biden has extended the suspension of tariffs on European Union, EU, steel and aluminium for 2 years. The move is aimed at continuing negotiations on measures to address overcapacity and low-carbon production. The U.S. suspended import tariffs on EU steel and aluminium for 2 years from January 2022, replacing the tariffs imposed by former President Donald Trump with a tariff rate quota system. The EU retaliated with tariffs on various U.S. goods, including motorcycles and whiskey, but those tariffs have also been suspended until 2025. The U.S. and the EU have been seeking agreement on measures to address excess metal production capacity in non-market economies, such as China, and to promote greener steel. NVIDIA's China customers to get hobbled version of gaming chip. Bloomberg. NVIDIA is selling a less capable version of its GTX 4090D graphics product in China, following tighter U.S. government restrictions on exports to the country. The Chinese version has around 10% fewer processing cores and fewer AI acceleration capabilities compared to the version sold in other countries. CEO Jensen Huang has said he will produce versions of NVIDIA's products that comply with U.S. export rules for China. The move comes as the U.S. seeks to limit China's access to specialized chips to slow down its AI capabilities. NVIDIA's shares rose slightly following the news. Gas prices expected to fall in 2024. The Independent. GasBuddy has forecasted that gas prices in the U.S. will continue to fall in 2024, with the national average unleaded gas price predicted to be $3.38 per gallon in the lead-up to the 2024 presidential election. Prices could drop below $3 by the end of winter before rising again in summer, with major cities potentially seeing prices peak at around $4 per gallon in 2024. Despite concerns about the global economy and ongoing conflicts, GasBuddy expects U.S. consumers to save around $32 billion on fuel costs in 2024 compared to 2023. The 2024 presidential election and the transition to electric vehicles are expected to have an impact on gas prices. White House hopeful Nikki Haley rebuked over Civil War comments. South China Morning Post. Republican presidential candidate Nikki Haley faced backlash after failing to mention slavery as a cause of the American Civil War. Haley stated at a campaign event that the cause of the war was basically how the government was going to run, and freedoms, and what people could and couldn't do. Haley attempted to clarify her comments, affirming that of course the Civil War was about slavery, and accused the questioner of being a Democratic plant sent to damage her campaign. Scholars agree that slavery was the main driver of the Civil War, and Haley's obfuscation prompted swift rebuttals. 5 ways women made a difference in 2023. Foreign policy. Women and girls are often the most affected by conflict, yet they are excluded from decision-making processes. However, they are also at the forefront of peacebuilding, and have made a significant impact in 2023. In Ukraine, women have played a crucial role in the military, and in providing humanitarian relief to families affected by the war. They are now engaging in discussions on Ukraine's recovery strategy. Sudanese women have been actively supporting each other amid the conflict, providing healthcare and distributing aid. Despite being subjected to repression, Iranian human rights activist Narges Mohammadi has continued her fight against oppression and has been awarded the Nobel Peace Prize. In Israel, Vivian Silver, the co-founder of Women Wage Peace, was among those killed in an attack. The organization has been working for peace between Israelis and Palestinians. In the Democratic Republic of Congo, women have demanded accountability and security from the authorities, and have become agents of peace. These women are proof that they will continue to fight for peace and a better future. The West may now have no option but to attack Iran. Telegraph. The recent attacks on commercial shipping and U.S. Navy vessels by Houthi rebels in the Red Sea, along with Iran's involvement in these attacks, threaten the global economy and the vital Suez Canal trade route. Iran's direct attack on an Israeli-affiliated merchant ship in the Indian Ocean marks the first time, since October 7, that Washington has directly blamed Iran. The West needs to expect more of the same from Iran, and should show resolve and capability to impose significant costs on Iran in order to deter further aggression. Overthrowing the Iranian regime is key to decreasing insecurity in the Middle East. Top Biden administration officials meet in Mexico for migration talks. Washington Post. Mexican President Andrés Manuel López Obrador and U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken met on Wednesday in Mexico City and agreed to form a working group to address the record numbers of illegal immigrants arriving at the southern U.S. border. No new initiatives were announced, but both governments are grappling with the escalating crisis on their shared border. López Obrador called on the Biden administration and the U.S. Congress to provide more resources for poor people in Latin America rather than erecting barriers to stop the flood of illegal migrants. Ukraine gets modest U.S. weapons package until Congress can agree to more. Washington Post. The modest $250 million weapons package the U.S. has sent to Ukraine as a stopgap measure will not change the situation on the battlefield in Ukraine's favor or enable it to resist effectively, says Yair Cherniv, a Ukrainian lawmaker. The country's president, Volodymyr Zelensky, thanked President Joe Biden for the weapons, however he added that the U.S.'s support for Ukraine is critical to countering terror and aggression in Ukraine and around the world. Financial assistance from the U.S. alone accounts for roughly a third of Ukraine's budget, and some salaries and social payments could be affected in January. Ladies and gentlemen, I am Dr. Six, your resident observer from the sixth dimension. Today we've peered into the crystal ball to bring you some intriguing predictions and news from around the world. First, we predict that Joe Biden will narrowly win a second term as the U.S. president. Now, this is not an endorsement, just a prediction. Secondly, North Korea is expected to conduct its seventh nuclear test, raising concerns about global security. And in Africa's coup belt, Chad is predicted to be the next country to fall victim to a coup. Moving on, there's a stalemate expected in Ukraine's conflict with Russia, but more funds may be unlocked for Ukraine from frozen Russian assets. In the Middle East, the Israel-Hamas war is not expected to escalate into a full-blown conflict with Hezbollah, which is a relief for the region. And in a positive development, the global health community is expected to make progress towards eliminating malaria by 2030. Now, let's dive into the news. The Red Sea and Suez Canal are facing challenges due to concerns about Houthi missile attacks. Shipping companies are avoiding the area, which is driving up shipping costs. Meanwhile, Maine and Colorado have declared Donald Trump ineligible to run for president again, and this issue may end up in front of the U.S. Supreme Court. In other news, the Biden administration is granting Louisiana the authority to approve carbon capture projects, which is a critical step in reducing greenhouse gas emissions. However, there are concerns about the state's ability to properly oversee the industry. And unfortunately, the body of a U.S.-Israeli woman killed in Gaza remains in the region, adding to the ongoing conflict. On a lighter note, Good Riddance Day was celebrated in Times Square, where people symbolically let go of their burdens and bad memories from the previous year. Participants expressed a desire to shed issues like anger, work stress, and worries about COVID-19. Lastly, gas prices in the U.S. are expected to fall in 2024, providing some relief for consumers. And Republican presidential candidates are already emerging for the 2024 election, including Nikki Haley, Ron DeSantis, and Chris Christie. That's all for today's news from the sixth dimension. Remember, these predictions and news items are just glimpses into a possible future. Let's hear your thoughts, folks. What do you make of these predictions and news? Thank you for tuning in. The content above showcases the latest briefing reports and analytical synopses, thoughtfully curated by the 6Do team. These insights stem from a wide array of reputable media outlets, think tanks, government sources, and specialized experts worldwide. We encourage you to explore these sources for a comprehensive perspective. Keep in mind that while the content may not always align with the official standpoint of 6Do Brief, it's not meant to be taken as absolute directives for decision-making. Comprising seasoned media professionals, learned scholars, and accomplished scientists, the 6Do team embodies a trailblazing, fully independent media entity. To customize 6Do Brief to meet your professional needs, you have the option to subscribe to a diverse array of briefings on our website, 6dobrief.com. Regardless of your location, you can conveniently receive 6Do Brief via email.